back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey, man, this time I'm going to do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Freehold, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, usually powered by Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you here on this Monday, the 12th day of August. I am, of course, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you from my dining room here in Freehold, New Jersey. Some technical issues today forcing me to do the podcast from home, but going to try to bring same energy, same positive vibes, should we say, although I'm not sure how positive I'm going to be about certain things I talk about today, but we'll try to get through it and manage things as well as possible. Give you some thoughts on what was a winning weekend for the Yankees, but another concerning thing popped up as to why I don't think they will win a World Series this year. The struggle that the Mets had on their West Coast trip, or whatever you want to call this 10-game road trip that they just went on, and some concerning things going forward with them. Of course, Team USA won the Olympic gold medal in men's basketball over the weekend. Give you some thoughts there. And as always, the Jets have to throw their head in the mix here. And just minutes before me getting ready to record today's podcast, they decided to poke their head out and make some noise this week. So why not? We'll talk about them at some point. But speaking of football, we're at that time of the year. Preseason is getting started. Training camps are going on. And it's a time of the year where a lot of people like to make predictions. A lot of people like to make bold predictions. A lot of people like to make wild claims because it's the only thing we can really talk about at this time of year. No one wants to sit here and break down preseason games. They're meaningless. They're lifeless unless you're that 45th through 55th player on a roster who's just barely clinging on for your NFL life. These games have no meaning behind them. They don't serve a real purpose other than the owners to fill their fat, greedy pockets and steal from the hardworking season ticket holders like yours truly. So at this time of the year, people like to make predictions. People like to talk about things off the field, whether it be contract concern or an injury that could affect a team's chances at making the playoffs or possibly even reaching the grandest goal of them all, winning the Super Bowl. And what I've come to find over the years is that the teams that are very noisy, the teams that have a lot of drama surrounding them, don't typically have great seasons, don't typically have those playoff earning seasons or even, dare I say, championship level seasons. Like last year, there was a whole lot of noise around my New York Jets with bringing in Aaron Rodgers. We've seen teams have humongous off seasons in the past. Remember the Vince Young labeled dream team of the Philadelphia Eagles about a decade ago, and they accomplished absolutely nothing. That's what I mean by when I talk about noise, when I talk about drama. I don't mean things like the crap that went on last year with the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce nonsense that hung over the NFL like a plagued disease. And hopefully we don't have to deal with that crap again this year. someone can finally knock the Chiefs off their pedestal. To me right now, there's no division in the NFL that has been noisier this offseason heading into training camp than the NFC East. A division that at times over the years we've referred to as the NFC Beast, and at times we've also referred to as the NFC Least. We've seen this division most recently than any other division have a team with a losing record as their division champions. I look at all of these teams, and surprisingly, all but one have noise surrounding. All but one seem to have drama surrounding them. And of all of them, the one that doesn't have the drama surrounding them is the most surprising of them all. And that would be the Washington Commanders. Is it wrong for me to come into this season, into this year, as somewhat bullish about the Washington Commanders' chances? Bullish on the Washington Commanders possibly being this year's Houston Texans. I don't look at them as a team that has as deep a wide receiver core as do the Texans, but this time last year, were we talking about Tank Dell? Were we talking about Nico Collins? They don't have a wide receiver on the level of a Steph Diggs, but Terry McLaurin is pretty damn good. Yes, they hired a new head coach this year in Dan Quinn. They drafted a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels, but there hasn't been a lot of off-the-field noise with them. There hasn't been any off-the-field nonsense with them because they have moved on from the Daniel Snyder era. They have moved on from what was an embarrassing dark time in their franchise history. And then I look around at the rest of the teams in that division, and in one way, shape, or form, they all have a lot of noise surrounding them. They all have a lot of nonsense surrounding them. Take the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, a nickname that, as you know, I despise, a nickname that I think is really corny and that they should have had ripped away from them a very long time ago, because even being the most popular team in the sport, or amongst the most popular teams, they really don't do anything on the field to back up that claim as America's team. In fact, the only way you could really argue they're America's team is the joy that they give the rest of America the day after they're eliminated from the postseason, or the day after the regular season ends and they've had an embarrassing loss to end their regular season. That's the one way that you can consider them America's team. But this is a team that coming into this year has a head coach in Mike McCarthy on the hot seat after what was an embarrassing postseason loss at home to the Green Bay Packers, a game they were never truly competitive in. They were down by as many as 4 touchdowns from the early phases of the third quarter on. It doesn't matter that they got it within 48-32. They got their doors blown off, and a lot of Dak Prescott's numbers in that game were empty calories. But you come into this year with Mike McCarthy on the hot seat. You also have the looming question surrounding their 3 biggest stars, their contract situations. Dak Prescott set to be an unrestricted free agent at year's end, and the Cowboys have continued to push that off and watch all of these other quarterbacks, whether it be Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, all of them get contract extensions along this offseason, pushing it to the point where, as we know, it's always been next man up as far as QB contracts are concerned. And Dak Prescott is that next man up. We're facing a reality that he may get $60 million per season next off season. And in all honesty, he is not a $60 million level quarterback. But that's where the Cowboys have placed themselves by continuing to push off negotiations with him. You also have CeeDee Lamb seeking a new deal. Micah Parsons coming to the end of his rookie contract. And both of these guys have outplayed their contracts, have played at top of the market, top level players for their position over the course of their deals, and they want to get paid for it. Micah Parsons wants to get paid like the top edge rusher in the sport. CeeDee Lamb, maybe he doesn't get more than Justin Jefferson, but he wants to get in the neighborhood of the 4-year, $114 million deal that Jefferson signed with the Vikings this offseason. And so far, CeeDee Lamb has been a complete no-show at training camp and preseason games for the Cowboys, leading to inner turmoil where first you have Jerry Jones going on the record and saying that he feels no urgency in signing Lamb to a contract extension before having to backpedal like hell, and during his portion of their pre-show for their first preseason game, he has the nerve to say, well, CD, you're missed, okay? And while on the surface people thought that was a complete backtrack, watch the clip. He comes off as narcissistic as humanly possible. So you've got all of that noise surrounding this team. Let's take the Philadelphia Eagles. The city of brotherly love. Well, it hasn't been exactly brotherly love for the Eagles over the last year. Because remember, they started off 10-1 on a season where they came off of losing the Super Bowl by one drive to the Kansas City Chiefs. Thought maybe they would run it back. But then they got their doors blown off at home against the San Francisco 49ers. And it began a tailspin that this team never could recover from, losing 6 of their last 7 games, including a playoff game down in Tampa Bay against the Buccaneers. And we would begin to learn over this offseason about all of the turmoil, the fall, the struggle in the relationship between probably the 2 most important people in that locker room, and that being quarterback Jalen Hurts and the head coach Nick Sirianni. And we've long known that Nick Sirianni is kind of a big baby. We've all known that Jalen Hurts is more of the adult in the room than Nick Sirianni. But when you read the article that was posted on ESPN last week by Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler, how they break down what was a year-long struggle in the relationship, including their differences on offensive philosophy. The fact that Hurts had a much closer relationship with his offensive coordinator than he did his own head coach. At times, no matter what Brian Johnson would call, he was constantly overruled by Nick Sirianni and having plays changed up. And Hurts was hearing too many differing voices rather than one united focus of trying to make Jalen Hurts the best quarterback he could possibly be. It was kind of something that was made to fail, something that was made to head toward an ugly end to their season. And even despite Nick Sirianni holding on to his job, he goes into this season with as much concerns over job security as Mike McCarthy does, especially when you consider there's the big fish hanging out there. There's Bill Belichick. There's a legendary head coach that would greatly be interested in taking over one of these situations. I think more so the Eagles than the Cowboys, because Eagles upper management, Howie Roseman, ownership, they more so let the coaches and players do their job. They aren't consistently butting their heads in. While meanwhile, Jerry Jones, it's I buy the groceries and make the meal when it comes to him. So you have those two noisy situations. And then there's the potential of a noisy situation when it comes to the New York Giants. Because normally you don't make as big a deal out of these training camp fights. We see it all the time, especially when there's the first week of practices of players in pads and they're dealing with these conjoint practices with another team. First time you're going up against someone more than your own teammates in a practice. Some tension can fill up the area. Some emotions can fly. You don't like to see your quarterback get involved in the mix like we saw Daniel Jones last week, but I could understand him wanting to defend his guy, Greg Van Roten, who he thought got unfairly shoved from behind by a member of the Detroit Lions defensive line. But what the Giants need to be very careful of is the situation surrounding Malik Neighbors. And yes, he's missing some time right now due to an ankle issue that he dealt with in their preseason game on Thursday. But you don't want to see what happened in the second day of their conjoint practice with the Lions become a trend. You just want that to be a blip on the radar when he's getting into an altercation with the corner Terrion Arnold from the Lions. At first, there was some friendly back and forth joking around with them. But then when another member of the Lions, Kirby Joseph, comes in, they're talking trash, and Neighbors is the first one to throw, I don't know if you want to call it a punch or a shove to the face, whatever it may be. That right there is something where you're like, we just dealt with this in recent years with Odell Beckham Jr. We don't want to deal with it again. The Giants brass, I'm talking Joe Shane, I'm talking Brian Dable, they've got to sit this kid down and calm him the hell out. They got to chill him the F out, because you don't want this being a situation where you have one player who thinks they run the room, who thinks they run the team like Odell Beckham did. Like Odell Beckham showed a complete lack of maturity here and in the end got Tom Coughlin fired from his job. So with all of that noise surrounding those three teams, is it wrong for me to be bullish on the Washington Commanders? Is it wrong of me to say that, yeah, these other teams may have more experienced talent, all have more experienced quarterbacks, but the Commanders have a veteran coach in Dan Quinn who did a very good job in repairing his reputation as a coach, as defensive coordinator for the Cowboys the last couple of years. Jaden Daniels has been as impressive a product as we've seen from any of these quarterbacks so far this preseason. Plus, he's the one that I feel the most confident on because he came out of LSU, which is in the SEC, the most difficult division, with all due respect to the Big Ten, in all of college football. And while they didn't make any over-the-top splashy moves in free agency, they brought in some quality veterans in Austin Eckler to put in that backfield, adding Bobby Wagner, who's not the same Bobby Wagner he was during his first tour of duty with the Seattle Seahawks, but still a veteran, a leader, a guy who's won before and could show these guys the way, show them how to be a professional about things in what they're trying to do in turn over what has been a bad vibe for decades in our nation's capital. So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe I'm overestimating the noise that surrounds these other teams. Maybe I'm too high on Jaden Daniels. But I am very bullish on this Washington Commanders team to be that surprise team coming into the league this year. Be that team that no one expects anything out of. And all of a sudden you wake up mid-December and you're like, holy crap, the Washington Commanders are going to the postseason. How the hell did that happen? A lot I want to get to throughout the rest of this podcast, mixing some baseball as we go on, some thoughts on Team USA. We'll give you some more thoughts on the NFL, including the news that broke about my New York Jets moments before I began recording this podcast today. So a lot to get to over the next 45, 50 minutes or so here. Glad you guys could join me this week. And as I tell you, each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, hell, put your feet up if you feel like it. I continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
I had big-time concerns this time last week about the upcoming schedule for the New York Mets. Not just because of the hellacious schedule that they had to deal with on this road trip. A road trip that is hard to describe, road trip that I've never seen a team have to go through before, where you start off in Anaheim for 3 games, then have a makeup game in St. Louis, before having to travel back up to the Mountain West time zone and play the Rockies at Coors Field in Denver, before having to travel up to the Great Northwest for 3 games over the weekend against the Seattle Mariners. That is hell for any team to have to go through, but especially a Mets team where you look at the month of August for this team, it does not get any easier. It does not put you in a position where you should feel great about the Mets in any way, shape, or form. Yes, you can look at their road trip and say, okay, they went 4-6. It's not great, but it's also not the end of the world. It's not going to completely crush their dreams of postseason hope, because they do sit here today a half game behind the Atlanta Braves for that 3rd wildcard spot. And the Braves have had some awful losses recently, including yesterday blowing an 8-2 lead in Colorado against those Rockies, and seem to constantly be dealing with injuries, are missing at least 2 members of their starting rotation, including Spencer Strider, who's out for the year with Tommy John surgery. They're without Acuna. They're without Albies. Matt Olson has not had anywhere near the season that he had last year. They've been a mess at times this year. Quite frankly, they're very fortunate to still be in the mix of things for a playoff spot, but you can attribute that to the fact that they have a very strong coaching staff and a very strong locker room culture there, where they do believe and feed off of that next man up philosophy. But the Mets, well, I'm not going to completely bury them for the weekend that they had against the Mariners. The Mariners have arguably the best pitching staff in baseball, lead the American League in ERA. Not the best of feelings that you could have when your team is outscored 22-1 over a 3-game span, and your stars outside of Francisco Lindor are nowhere to be found. Brandon Nimmo, over this 9-game trip, hit 200 and drove in 1 run. Nimmo, his problem to me is he doesn't know what he wants to be. He last year had an explosive year when it came to power. He had a year that you never expected from him as far as being a home run hitter. You always expected him to be kind of a guy that would hit for a lot of doubles and triples like he did in 2018 when he had 28 doubles. The last 2 years, 30 doubles. But last year, he just out of nowhere had a 24 home run season. And I think in the back of his mind, he started to think that he's a slugger. He started to think that he's some kind of big-time power hitter, when that shouldn't be what his game is predicated on. His game should be predicated on using his speed, using his athleticism, hit a lot of doubles, get on base a lot for the guys behind him, and wreak havoc on the base paths. But unfortunately, he's never been the kind of guy that wants to steal a lot of bases. He's never been the guy that takes advantage of that athleticism. And it's led to him struggling at times. It's led to him being kind of inconsistent, kind of being... I've always compared him to former Yankee Brett Gardner a lot. It's hard to argue that they are not similar kind of players when you consider that neither one is a real true power hitter, but their best position is left field. JD Martinez, who was such a strong addition, such a strong acquisition for this team, he was very quiet on this road trip, only hit $188. And then there's the guy that is going to continue to get the most attention, and that is, of course, Pete Alonso. And we're coming off of what was, quite frankly, an awful week for Pete, both on the field and off the field. When you consider this time last week, he was making comments such as, oh, I'm an all-star, I am on pace to hit 40 home runs this year. Kind of selfish comments about himself when the team was coming off of a win against the St. Louis Cardinals. Over this road trip, he struck out 17 times in 10 games. Yes, he had 3 home runs, but 2 of those were in one game against the Rockies in Coors Field last Thursday. And over this weekend against the Seattle Mariners, he was 0 for 11 with 6 strikeouts. And on top of that, he's batting around $130 since the beginning of June with the runners in scoring position. This has been as awful a walk year as you could possibly have for Pete Alonso. And while I don't believe he's going to hit that 40 home run mark, the Mets have got to get this guy to wake the hell up if they have any chance here in the month of August, because the month of August is going to decide whether they're a playoff team or not. This week is a week where they have to just blow the doors off of the opposition. You got the A's and the Marlins coming in to your ballpark. And I know teams like this have been feisty and pesky for the Mets to deal with over the years. But this cannot be one of those situations where you're looking up at the end of the week and you see the Mets went 3-3 and lost one of these series. At minimum, they need to win 5 of these 6 games. At minimum, we need to be sitting here a week from now when they're getting set to play the Baltimore Orioles and saying, all right, the Mets took care of business. They put themselves in a good spot, a good position going forward here, where after this week, you've got a 10-game, really difficult stretch. I've talked about how the Yankees are fortunate that the Orioles have struggled and allowed them to both remain tied in the American League East. Well, the Orioles have started to get a jolt recently since Jackson Holliday came back up from the minor leagues. He's hit 4 or 5 home runs in his last 6 games and been a spark plug for that offense at a time they need it with how many pitching injuries they have. But then after that, you've got this 7-game West Coast trip, 4 against the Padres and 3 against the Diamondbacks. A Diamondbacks team that started off slowly this year, had an awful start from Corbin Carroll, but he's recently started to pick things up. And these two teams steamrolled past the Mets in July are both on an 8-2 run in their last 10 games and have pulled within 3.5 games of the Dodgers in the National League West. So maybe what the Mets shouldn't be looking up at so much is the Padres and Diamondbacks, with how well those two teams have played, with how they've put themselves in good position for playoff runs, whether it be with the wild card or even possibly catching the Dodgers. But be concerned with the Atlanta Braves, who seem to have a never say die, never quit attitude. And then there are teams right behind them that are starting to catch steam. The Cardinals, I have no faith in, because the Cardinals, they don't seem to know how to score. You have bad years from Paul Goldschmidt and year from Nolan Arenado. The Giants are 7-3 in their last 10. The Chicago Cubs have recently gotten hot and are only 2.5 games behind you. I've won 4 in a row, winning 8 of their last 10. So you've got to be concerned that this could all be coming away from the Mets, a team that needs to rely on their offense to win, because their pitching staff is not that impressive. They don't have that true ace. Luis Severino has kind of come down to earth as of recently, and you can't expect Sean Manaea to go out there and give you 7 innings every start. That's never been who he's been. So I'm concerned for the Mets. I don't root against the Mets. I also don't root for the Mets. But I'm concerned that this month of August, after what a fun time that fan base had in the month of June and early stages of July, it could all be thrown away with this gauntlet of a schedule they've got coming up here in August. What I'm also greatly concerned about is, as a Yankee fan, the number one thing that keeps me from saying they could be a World Series team continues to pop up. And that is the outright disaster that this Yankee bullpen continues to be. Yesterday should have been a walk in the park. Yesterday should have been as easy a win as you could possibly have for this team. But Mark Leiter Jr. wanted to just throw gasoline on the fire. Meanwhile, you had Clay Holmes continue to create Clay Holmes-like situations, continue to have you sitting there on your hands thinking, God damn it, this guy's going to blow his 10th save opportunity of the year, isn't he? He is very fortunate that Gleyber Torres didn't even bobble the ball or even throw it into the Yankee dugout with how scary that 9th inning became. A day where you had massive home run from Giancarlo Stanton to enlarge your lead. Long bombs from Soto. The 42nd home run from Aaron Judge. Still, this bullpen continues to be the biggest concern for me. It's not Aaron Judge constantly getting walked and whether or not the bats behind him are going to get the job done. Listen, anybody who's complaining about the number of times Aaron Judge is getting intentionally walked, deal with it. The guy's on one of the great runs we've ever seen from an offensive player, and that these managers are going to force other players to try to beat them. They're not going to continue to let Judge come up there, and whether it's a fastball, breaking ball, or a off-speed pitch, continue to send the ball 9,000 miles and make them feel like fools for even pitching to them. So I don't want to hear any of these complaints from like the Yankee broadcasters like Michael Kay, who are saying, oh, they got to change up the intentional walk rule, or fans who are saying, oh, I hate seeing Aaron Judge get walked. No, deal with it. He's the best player on the team. He's the best player in the sport. Barry Bonds had to deal with it. If the other guys behind him can't carry their weight, that's their problem. The only thing I'd like to see get changed with the intentional walk rule is I want them to go back to where you're making pitchers throw the 4 pitches for the intentional walk rather than just sticking your hand up from the dugout saying, yeah, just go to first base. That, to me, is taking away from something here in the sport, because I've seen so many pitchers that either can't throw those pitches, or after they throw the intentional walk pitches, can't hit the strike zone to save their lives. But this Yankee bullpen is greatly concerning. You have no one that has legitimate flamethrower-like stuff other than possibly Tommy Kahnle. I've said it for weeks. I think the likes of Mike Tonkin and Luke Weaver look exhausted, and you saw that on Saturday with how each one of them got beat up in the second half of that doubleheader. This bullpen, it provides nothing that you can feel positive about. There's no one that is coming in other than, maybe Jake Cousins and Tommy Kahnle. And how sad is that you're relying on Jake Cousins, a guy that you picked up off the scrap heap, to be one of your most confident relievers at this point in the season. But this is why I wanted Brian Cashman to go out there and make a big move for the bullpen at the deadline. Because there's no one from the starting rotation that if you get into the postseason, you can pull from that and put in the bullpen and think they're going to be an effective weapon. Marcus Stroman is a pitch-to-contact guy. And Nestor Cortez, I don't want him anywhere near the postseason roster. He's done to me. The cute story is over. He has meh-like stuff and is getting knocked around the ballpark, yet he wants to keep going out there running his mouth on social media. This bullpen is going to be the Yankees' undoing. It's going to be what cost them from winning a World Series in what is possibly the only year you have Juan Soto. And it's a sad, disgusting state of mind that as a fan and probably even some players in that room, that as soon as you see that bullpen door open at Yankee Stadium or wherever the Yankees are playing on that given night, rather than having utter confidence like you did so many times over the better part of the last 2 decades, not just when they had Mariano Rivera, but some of these other great relievers they've had like David Robertson, Dellin Betances, even the likes of a Chad Green. But you have no confidence in some of these guys that are coming in because they are walking the ballpark and causing heart attacks on a night in, night out basis.
I'll be back.
I mentioned earlier how there's teams in the NFL that always seem to deal with a lot of drama, always have a lot of noise around them. Well, just when you think that there's not going to be any noise, things are going to be quiet, you count out the New York Jets way too soon from having some kind of drama surrounding them. And this is something I've been concerned about. This is something I have been worried about for the last couple months as they traded for edge rusher Haason Reddick from the Philadelphia Eagles. He has not been part of any of their off-season programming, whether it be the voluntary OTAs, their mini camp in June, nothing. He hasn't been part of anything, has missed the first 21 days of training camp, losing $50,000 per day in fines. And now, earlier today, ESPN reported that Haason Reddick has requested a trade from the New York Jets. Yep, that's right. He has requested a trade from the team he was traded to back in March before he has even taken a snap. Somewhere in all of this, and I've been saying this for a while, someone is lying. Whether it be the Jets in saying that they had a verbal agreement with Haason Reddick that they would address his contract situation either once he showed up or at some point during the season once he played some games for them, or it's Haason Reddick is lying and lied to the Jets about being content with his current contract situation and had been planning to hold out the entire time, whether it be when he was still with the Eagles or now with the Jets if he didn't get the deal he wanted. As we go on here, despite how many times this has blown up in my face, despite how many times they have shown we should not trust them. I'm starting to side with the Jets in all of this and starting to believe that they were the ones right and they were the ones that were lied to by Haason Reddick. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a New York Jets fan and I'm a New York Jets season ticket holder. I'm saying this because this guy has not played one damn snap for this team. This guy has done nothing, has no currency with my team, hasn't won us anything, hasn't been part of anything here. He literally just got here and he's already making demands with this team, whether it be over a contract extension before even showing up, saying that he does not want to show up until he's paid like one of the top edge rushers, whereas the Jets refuse to negotiate with a player unless he's in camp, which is completely understandable. And I can understand things from his side of things, as this is likely the last big payday he's ever going to get because he is at 30 and who knows how many great years you can expect out of this guy. But if you're the Jets, why are you going to be taking demands from someone who, as I said, has never played a snap for your team, who gave you his word and is now pulling back on it and is making you guys look like the butt of all jokes once again for something that you have no control over? You made a trade, what you thought was a good trade, trading for a player that, as much as I like Bryce Huff, I think many people would agree Haason Reddick is an upgrade over Bryce Huff when you consider that Bryce Huff was more of a rotational edge rusher, whereas Haason Reddick is a guy that barely misses a snap and has been one of the top edge rushers in the sport the last 4 seasons. He's 4th in the league with 50.5 sacks in that time. But he's put themselves in an awful spot where they've constantly got to answer questions about this every single day, where now you're relying on the likes of Michael Clemens and Will McDonald to be more than just depth pieces, more than just guys that you can put in certain packages. One of them is potentially going to have to start at that spot instead of Haason Reddick. And it makes Joe Douglas look like a clown rather than a guy that's trying to put his best foot forward in a year where, let's face it, if this all blows up this year, that's it for Joe Douglas. That's it for Robert Saleh. They have to win this year. And I'm not saying win the Super Bowl. I'm saying make the postseason. It cannot be just, oh, the Jets played 17 games this year, went a cute 9-8, 10-7. No, they have to be in the playoffs or these guys are gone. They're starting over with general manager and head coach. So you really think they like this scenario? You really think they feel like they were put in a good spot here? No, they're the ones that were clearly lied to by Haason Reddick. And I like the fact that Joe Douglas is sticking firm to it with the statement he put out earlier, saying that they're not going to trade Reddick. They are going to continue to fine him according to the CBA, and they're not going to have any discussions with him about a contract extension as long as he continues this holdout. And that's the way it should be. It's one thing if this was a guy that had spent his entire career with the Jets and was a guy that was edging toward Ring of Honor considerations for them. He just got here. He's done nothing for you. And he's pulling this crap and he's dragging the Jets name, which is already considered amongst the laughing stocks in this league anyway, right through the mud and creating a very ugly situation for them. Something that I doubt Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas thought they'd be dealing with at this time of the year. I don't want to make too big a deal of these preseason games because there's a lot of guys playing in these games that are not going to be on NFL rosters when all is said and done. A lot of these guys that are going to be going back to working normal 9-to-5 kind of jobs and not experiencing the glory and the prestige and the privilege that is playing in the NFL. But by all accounts, all of these rookie quarterbacks represented themselves pretty well over the weekend. And you would expect that in these games, getting their feet wet, getting their first time in the spotlight, their first game action underway. The only two amongst these 6 quarterbacks that I think you can lock it down, write it in ink, that unless they're injured, are going to be the starters on opening day are Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. The other 4 guys, it's a very intriguing thing. With Drake May, I think if the Patriots had it their way, he wouldn't play until mid-December at the earliest. They want this to be the ultimate red shirt year. The same thing goes with the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings, Kevin O'Connell wants to win this year. Kevin O'Connell does not want to be spending this year developing his young quarterback. He wants the young quarterback to watch. He wants Sam Darnold to be the guy for them, and this to be a redshirt year that he gets, some game action in during blowouts, but is not really a big part of this team's potential success in the 2024-25 season. Michael Penix, you could see in some game action early on due to the fact that Kirk Cousins is coming off of a torn Achilles, and we have no idea how he's going to bounce back from that, although they do have a schedule that would be rather difficult for a rookie quarterback to have to step into right away. When you consider they start off against the Pittsburgh Steelers, then you got a Monday nighter in Philadelphia against the Eagles, followed by a Sunday night game at home with the Chiefs. Their first 5 games are nothing to sneeze at, nothing to say, oh, yeah, that's going to be easy. When you consider after that, you've got home division matchups against the Saints and the Buccaneers. Remember the Buccaneers, the team that won the division last year? Despite all of this hoop and hurrah the Falcons have been getting this offseason, the Buccaneers are the team that represented that division in the postseason last year and actually won a playoff game. Of the non-Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels quarterbacks, I think the one that has the best chance of starting early on is probably Bo Nix, and I think that's what Sean Payton wants to happen. It's going to turn out that they wasted, if you want to call it that, trading a 7th-round pick to get at Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, you keep hearing it every day, his snaps in training camp are going down, down, down by the day. And Jarrett Stidham, we've seen this guy around the league before. He's your classic backup quarterback. Bo Nix, with some of the things you saw against the Colts, they are clearly trying to tailor this offense around him, whether it be with their RPOs that they've mixed in there, whether it be with his ability to run with the football, whether it be with all of his ability to break out from the pocket and throw the football on the run. The Broncos did not just draft this guy at 12 overall for Sean Payton to have him sit on the bench. They clearly like his ability. They clearly like his talents. That's why he played most of that preseason game against the Colts over this weekend. So unless there's some kind of injury for him, unless there's something that pops up along this preseason, I would be very surprised if Bo Nix is not starting the season as the quarterback for the Denver Broncos. Now, what do you have to lose? The Broncos, they've been through 13 different quarterbacks since Peyton Manning retired. You might as well throw the kid out there and see what you got. See if this can be your long-term answer. Even though you're going to have a very difficult time in a division that already has Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs running things, and now Jim Harbaugh, they're trying to coach up the Chargers and take Justin Herbert to a level that we haven't seen from him yet. Might as well break the kid in now, and rather than continue to have him glued to the bench.
I'll be back.
While no one, unless you're a complete sicko or some kind of deranged person, likes to see any injuries or see anyone go through times of medical struggles, whatever you may want to call it. There's a lot of drama surrounding the 49ers right now that could work out in the New York Jets' favor as they play the 49ers to start off the 2024 season. They may be saying it's only going to be a couple of week thing, but I right now find it hard to believe that Christian McCaffrey is going to play in the opening week game between the Jets and 49ers on Monday Night Football. We've seen it plenty of times where someone strains their calf and they come back too soon and all of a sudden it blows up into something worse. And you saw the workload that this guy had last year, a career high 417 touches, including the playoffs. They were planning on building him up slowly in training camp. And now with that not there for him, it's going to take some time for him to build up. He's even a guy that says training camp is important to him because he prepares himself for the taxing workload that he's going to deal with over the course of the season. This is not your traditional running back where they just hand him the ball and tell him to run right up the middle. They use him in so many different ways in not just the ground game, but the passing attack as well, which makes him such a unique dual threat for this team, makes him amongst the most dangerous weapons in the sport. So it's going to take some time for him to get ready. And all of this going on while you have the noise surrounding this team that continues to go on when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk. And you would have thought that this would be resolved by now. But the fact that now they are willing to listen to trade talks with other teams at a time where he is pulling the rare hold in. He's not participating in any practices, but he's at the facility. He's been part of all the team meetings, all of the wide receiver position meetings, and is being a good soldier while not participating in anything, still demanding to be paid as one of the top wide receivers in the sport. Back when he was originally making these demands, the 49ers at least had a leg to stand on. Now it's becoming more and more difficult scenario for them because you've seen of the top 10 paid wide receivers in this sport, 8 of those contracts were signed during this offseason, including 2 with the Philadelphia Eagles and 2 with the Miami Dolphins. So he's seeing those numbers and he's like, wow, my price tag has gone up. I'm not asking for the same deal I asked from the Niners back in March. And the Niners have been put in an uncomfortable spot because we talked about before with the Niners, it's pretty much a now or never scenario with them. They've got so many guys coming off the books as far as needing new deals. You're already paying big money to Deebo Samuel, paying big money to Christian McCaffrey, to Bosa. Trent Williams has been holding out looking for a new deal. Fred Warner is getting paid big money. So they can't pay everybody. And at some point, you're going to also have to pay your quarterback. At some point, you're not going to be able to just say, oh, we've got Mr. Irrelevant here. We can pay him 7th round money. It's not going to work like that forever. It's difficult, the spot that they're in. They want to keep Brandon Aiyuk, but they can't give him the amount of money that he wants to make. So that's why you've been hearing the reports in the last week about possible talks with the Patriots, the Browns, the Steelers. And if I were the Cleveland Browns, I'd be all over this. If you're telling me that I could get Brandon Aiyuk for a deal that involves a package of picks and Amari Cooper, who's starting to get up there in age, Absolutely, I'll sign up for that right now. Let's do that deal right now. Amari Cooper, while he's still a quality player in this league, is not as young or athletic and not as potentially game-breaking as Brandon Aiyuk. Aiyuk brings a different look for that Cleveland Browns offense. And I doubt you want to see him go to a division rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are dealing with their own problems in their own right when it comes to their quarterback situation. So this is becoming a very messy, very hairy situation for the San Francisco 49ers in a year where it's pretty much Super Bowl or bust for them, as it's been the last couple of years. But now, this year, more so than ever, with a team that is starting to get to the end of the line as far as guys being happy with their current contract situation. And I'll close up with some thoughts on Team USA, as the men's USA Olympic basketball team won the gold medal over the weekend in defeating France in the finals. But it's very difficult for me to enjoy this. I didn't get to watch a lot of these games because they were all going on while I was at work. None of them were on at primetime spots here in America. But also, when you're rooting for a team that is expected to win, that it's win or immense disappointment, where you would be more disappointed over them not winning the title than you would be happy about them winning the title, it becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult to get excited when it finally does happen. It was more of a sigh of relief moment for me, especially when I'm at work on, Thursday afternoon, and I'm seeing on Twitter that they were struggling just to get by Serbia. They're down by 17 points at one point, going into the final quarter, down by 13. And finally, after 4 games of being like, Steph Curry, where are you? He decided to wake the hell up and led a 32-15 charge, including a dagger 3 with less than a minute to go that put them in the final game. After the first 4 games where he struggled from 3, he was our best player on Thursday afternoon, carried away with 36 points in that game, was extremely sharp from behind 3. And everybody throughout that game seemed to kind of have their moment. You had a big shot from Booker along the way. Durant made some big plays. You had another controversy with Jason Tatum not getting to play. But all in all, they did what they needed to do, survived that, and got to the finals against France, where it was kind of a preview of what's to come as far as what we could potentially be dealing with in the future. Because you got to imagine the next time that the Olympics rolls around in 2028, we're certainly not going to have LeBron there. In all likelihood, we're not going to have Steph Curry or Kevin Durant there. It's going to be a team largely led by the likes of Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Bam Adebayo probably will be in the mix. Anthony Davis possibly be in the mix of things. Tatum, amongst others, depending on who comes out in these drafts. You always have a star that emerges out of somewhere. Maybe at that time, someone on the Knicks is playing for them, such as Jalen Brunson. But it's going to be a true changing of the guards the next time that we're in the Olympics. And you're going to be going up against teams that are led by the likes of Victor Wembanyama or Luka Doncic or Giannis Antetokounmpo. See, we do not have the overwhelming edge over these countries anymore, or at least we won't. There are stars coming from around the world all the time. Nikola Jokic as well. Definitely got to throw his name in the hat there. So we've got to appreciate this. We've got to not take this moment for granted. It's the last time we're going to see LeBron in the Olympics. The next time the Olympics rolls around, who knows? Steph Curry could be retired by then. And I was thinking about this the other day. I've said this before, that we're going to miss LeBron when he's gone. We're really going to miss Steph Curry because he changed this sport as much as anybody ever has. Because some of the shots that either he was taking in this Olympics or that he has taken over time. In the past, growing up, we would have thought those are atrocious shots. We would have thought that, what is this player doing? Why are they shooting from the parking lot? And he has changed a generation of basketball players' way of thinking. He has perfected that so much that it's become second nature. It's become almost effortless for him to pull off things like that. Now, at times, I do think it has made some of the NBA unwatchable because you have players that shouldn't be three-point shooters thinking that they can go out there and be three-point shooters. But all in all, what Steph Curry has done over his career is remarkable. What he did in this Olympics is remarkable. Even though LeBron was the most consistent player throughout these 6 games, I think there was definitely the case to be made for Steph being the overall Olympics MVP, because they don't win these last 2 games without Steph Curry, especially not that semifinals game against Serbia with how dominant Jokic was throughout that game. So I hope everyone appreciates this gold medal that this team won and appreciates this performance that Steph Curry just put on. Because when he's gone, we're not going to see another player like this for a very long time. Guys are going to take ridiculous shots and hoist up threes at a high rate. But no one's going to make these kind of shots and make them at the kind of ease that Steph Curry has. He has changed the sport in some ways for the bad, but largely for the better, and something that we should never take for granted when it comes to the greatness of Steph Curry. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, August 12th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You got one life, people, so you might as well try to live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, and I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.